Welcome back to Chai Chat. We are trying to understand radicalization in UK and Europe, and in this segment we'll try to understand what we can do. But before that, I just want to ask, is there something in Islam which is prone to be interpreted in a certain manner?
No, Islam is like all religions. It's a text which is composed of the Quran and
Why
the
is
Hadith.
it being misinterpreted so much?
It is those who are responsible for it are actually the group who have taken it to that direction. But it's a text which you can read and become peaceful, like Sufis, for example, or some Brahmins, or it depends on how you read this text and what purpose are you reading for this text. So it depends on the reader himself, but the text itself can't be blamed of what it contains.
I'm not blaming. What I'm saying is there something which makes it more prone to misinterpretation?
I don't think so. It's like all other religions in this sense. What the Islamists have done and the violent extremist groups is that they decontextualize certain text from its own historical background and they universalize as the norm.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Yeah, for example, some certain verses in the Quran that talks about fight the unbelievers whenever you see them and kill them and take them as a hostage. There are certain verses in the Quran that talks about a war context. And these war contexts actually are limited to the mainstream Muslims. If you ask the mainstream Muslims in India or in Egypt or on Saudi Arabia, they would say these texts are actually referring to a historical accounts. But there are other verses in the Quran that talks about peace, love, pluralism. But for the extremist and Islamist ideology, they will say that these verses that talks about war context are the only valid version that takes over all other verses that talks about pluralism and peaceful coexistence. So they abuse the text itself into their own favor. And we can admit that there are plenty of scholars, ulama, and plenty of Muslims around the world who are playing a great role in countering extremism by their own peaceful interpretation of Islam.
Imranji, you want to add?
Now, what I see is, please, when you say Islam is my religion.
Yes.
I went to the most revered saints, Madrassa and the Maktab, when I was 8, 9, and 10-year-old. All my brothers used to go, and that gentleman is the main gentleman who actually brought Islam into Sylhet, the part of the Bangladesh that we are from in UK. Now, that Islam never taught anything bad, okay? And it is a Sufi form of Islam. But the Islam that I see today is miles away from the Islam that I've been taught or I was preached upon. Now, this Islam is a political Islam. This political Islam has political agenda. I can see one thing, if I'm not unfair, if you allow me to say, I can see, for as a student of history, the present-day Islamic preaching by that vested group, not the overall Muslims. Vested groups preaching is very close to the motivation that the Nazis did before they ran up to the establishment of Hitler in Germany in the 1930s.
Who are they? Whose vested interest is it?
The people who want to create a pan-Islamic world where everybody else will be slave, the infidels will be of their slave, and there will be anybody and everybody will be taken into account if they disobey the tenets of their rules and regulations and their provisions and their laws, basically.
Would you agree, Dr. Downing?
Well, this is the worldview of the Islamic political Islam, basically. So if you look at Sayyid Qutb, if you look at Baghdadi, who was at one point the leader of the Islamic State, this is the worldview they have. But they don't just want to enslave non-Muslims, they will even go as far as to enslave and to exterminate
Other
Muslims that don't agree with them. What we need to remember is throughout the world, the biggest victims of Islamic political Islam and its violence are Muslims. Even if you are the same, even if you're a Sunni Muslim in a place like Egypt or if you're in a place like Iraq, if you don't agree with their ideology, they'll kill you. And this is something that we often forget in the coverage in Europe, where we see, you know, a Muslim terrorist carry out an attack in France or the UK. We miss all of this, these nuances, because we don't see that what's happening in that part of the world. Even in France, the attacks that I've studied, there are a lot of Muslim victims. There are Algerian victims, Tunisian victims, French Muslim victims, and this is something I think we need to take into account. Is it's not as simple as saying they have a view for non-Muslims, they have a view for Muslims also, which Muslims do not want, because it's violent, because it's oppressive.
The most violent expression of Islamism is Salafi jihadism. Salafi jihadism is another harsh form of political Islam. It's a very literalist approach, and you can label all the extremist groups that appeared in the Middle East and in here as belonging or under this category, like Daesh or Qaeda. They are under the label of Salafi jihadism. They take a jihad as a universal duty, war against the whole world, until the war has to continue, until all the world become Muslim, or the whole world submit to their authority and pay them something called religious tax or jizya, or the war has to continue until other faith disappear from the face of the earth. And they will use some, unfortunately, misinterpret certain verses in the Quran, like وَقَاتِلُهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةً وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ, until religions all belong to God, meaning to become Muslim.
So it is not...
Sorry to interrupt. The dichotomy is, Lavina, across the board, the biggest problem that they are fermenting the ideology is because we Muslims are very complacent to admit that there is a problem. If we all unite together and say there is a problem, guys, let's fix it, perhaps we can do a change, an ocean change in this perspective.
I always believe, I think you guys, or the Muslim guys, moderate Muslim guys who believe that Muslim versus all the world is not the teaching of Quran, should actually stand for yourself, because this is standing for yourself. And I feel unless the Muslim world stands, we don't stand a chance.
The problem lies with everything. Nobody is looking at it in a holistic way. Well, if there is a terrorism problem, right? Sky, BBC, or all the world media call someone who himself is a preacher preaching wrong things. Why? Why do you need to have a verdict or a consent or a comment from someone who himself is polluting the brain? Exactly. Why can't they come to someone who looks at it in a different perspective, neutrally, and who is courageous enough to say candidly, not being complacent, that look guys, we have a problem, let's fix our house in order. Instead, they bring upon someone who himself is into preaching. I don't want to name any names. If you want, I can send you the links. You can have a look at it yourself, but this is where the problem lies.
Go on, you want to add something?
No, I think that the media, I'm not coming from a media background myself, and I'm not defending also their position, but I think the media plays a wonderful role in naming and shaming these voices.
That's true.
When he giving a voice, when he giving a platform to those people, he exposing the weaknesses of their rhetorics to the public opinion, and then forming a resistance in the community from this type of poisonous narrative. It's not bad at all, just to bring these weird voices. And we know it's weird. We know that it is dangerous sometimes, but it needs to be it needs to be challenged. The public opinion needs to be warned against it. The media is not doing a bad role at all. The opposite is true. I would really appreciate the role in just naming and shaming.
So very quickly now, we have to see how we fix this. What can we do? How we fix it, what can we do? Who wants to start?
I think there are two main strands or two main ways. Something called soft measures and hard measures. Soft policies and hard policies. At least soft policies, this is the building the resilience in the community, the role of the civil society in challenging extremism. And this is a start actually with engaging the vulnerable communities to extremism. We have far-right extremism, we have Islamist extremism. We need to engage these two, or those communities more vulnerable to extremism, into the table, into playing a role. And as there is no one way of extremism, and out of it, there is also no one single way of combating it. There are different multi-layered set of ideas. One of soft role of civil society, starting from families, the parents, early intervention from the beginning, spotting the signs, spotting the changes on the community level, our mosques, our community centers, also in the schools.
Become eyes and ears for the government.
Yes, in the schools.
Become the eyes and ears.
It's your duty as a citizen to intervene and protect. Radicalization is a disease. Like you protect your child from a disease, you need to protect him from radicalization.
From drugs or
Or from crime or from gangs.
Quickly, what if the parents are also?
Parents are, yes, this is very important.
If the parents are also believe in it,
Yeah,
then
parents are believing in it, and they are also in some way colluding with the process of...
yes, and they would not report the madrasa, they would
But
send
I
them.
think the biggest problem that I can see, I don't know how it's going to sound, but if you look at the history over a period of last 500 years in Europe and elsewhere, all religions have reformed. Okay? And I think it's time that we do something to reform the religion, the theological aspect of it. There should be, Islam should have a central body who should actually overlook and appoint people who are authorized within the parameters of the preaching, and they don't go beyond it like the way we have practiced.
Very, very good point. Evolution of Islam.
Yes.
This is the time,
Yes.
because I believe that every religion does go through this period of crisis, and
In the
if
last
they
500
evolve,
years, if you look at Europe has gone through a massive...
yeah, crusades and
Yeah.
even Hinduism. So, I mean, contextualizing Islam and allowing it to evolve rather than calling it be all and end all. Is that right?
Yes.
Very good.
What I would also say, add in a more kind of sociological opinion here, and removing it a bit from the theological. If you look at the Charlie Hebdo attackers, for example, in France,
Yes.
their neighbours found their cache of weapons a few months before the attack, and they didn't say anything. The neighbours wanted to go to the police, but in the area that they lived in, there is no police presence. And what we have, especially in France, this is a major problem where there are entire large sectors of French cities that house tens of thousands of people, where if you're a victim of normal crime, you call the police, they don't come. And the state is almost completely absent, the police are afraid to go there. Now in the UK, thankfully, we don't have this to this extent, but we do have areas of extreme poverty.
Mr. Trump would like to think there is.
He would like to think there is. And we have areas of extreme poverty, even within London, where austerity has really stripped back social services and law enforcement.
Yeah, go on,
No, I
Simona.
would just say the force or the hard way I don't think on itself it can work. That's why I think
Hard and soft together.
yeah, together, because if you remain with the same economic disparities and a community that is not integrated, that is, it feels that it is not part of the larger community, a larger entity, then these problems will rise up again in a different fashion.
The reason I'm saying
There is a problem of community being claustrophobic too. They don't go and reach out.
Exactly.
Ethnic
I was
minority
saying.
communities, they don't go and reach out. I have been trying to make my community more approachable, integrate with the mainstream society, and I find it, believe me or not, it's uphill struggle. People don't want to associate, they don't want to go out, they don't want to mingle. How are you going to build bridges if you are not ready to put up one
Yeah.
pillar?
That's the reason for it is if someone is soft and someone who is not obeying the law is able to call the shots.
I just want to one last bit quickly understand from you. You said Islam needs evolution. What is that? What
I'm not a theologist, I'm not a
Can you-
teacher. I'm just a
don't-
normal
can you- or is
believer
it be
in the
very long?
religion, and I think about it, I see the problem.
What is it that needs to be
I think-
contextualized?
I think when you asked him the question about the translation of the Quran, different meanings, and then preaching it to the youngsters or susceptible people to actually motivate them to do something wrong. I think if you ask, there are so many different segments of Islamic preaching that you ask one surah, one line to 500 Maulanas.
And I know, that's what I'm saying. That's what I meant by interpretation.
But this is-
Why is it prone to misinterpretation?
Because there is no solution, permanent encyclopedia solution. that people can go and
One
actually
reference.
yeah
No,
reference.
but this is actually in all religions, even in
Yeah, yeah,
Catholicism.
we're
This is
speaking
in,
about
you don't
That's what I'm
have
saying.
a
What is it when
uniform.
you-
The problem is there is no central body. Islam has no central body because there is something to do with the nature of the religion itself. It doesn't have a central clergy system.
Yes, that's what I'm
So
meaning.
every group can
Papacy kind of thing.
interpret the religion in their own way, right?
It's a franchise. You take it like, for example, if you go to our part of the world, the Deoband is teaching in one way,
That's it.
the Sufism is teaching in another
Yeah.
way, the Jamaat-e-Islami is teaching another way, the
And
Wahhabi is teaching in another way, the Shias, the Sunnis, the Ahmed is teaching. So I think there is a time, there's a need for a central body who would manage all these administrations, the PR. Look, all these things are happening. No, the chief Islamic cleric, there is no one we know. He hasn't come out and said that let's stop this. So many terrorist attacks and nobody has given any narrative about it.
I think the creation of such a central body would be quite dangerous.
And yeah,
Really?
And
It can be, it can be. If it is stolen, yes.
Because even in history, when you had the caliph
Yes.
in the Islamic world,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was never one undisputed authority. You had a caliph in Fez in Morocco, a caliph in Istanbul, Shia scholars in Iran. Like this has never actually taken place.
One
Can I
person.
quickly end just one word from you on resolution? One word, not sentence, one word. What needs to be done from us? What can we do as citizens?
The role of civil society in preventing radical Islamism and far-right extremism is crucial and important.
I think the preaching parameter has to be ascertained, that you cannot go beyond this. Don't talk about wars and all these things, because the more you give adventures into the brains of the youngsters, they are very susceptible to grab it and utilize it.
You've entered another, you opened another bag of worms. You're saying regulating madrasas.
That's true.
That's another bag of worms. Regulating madrasas. Go on.
Well, I would say first of all, love your neighbour, and also equally as important, remember that your government is there to serve you, and that governments need to reach out into areas which are poor, which are isolated, and make sure they have a presence, and a positive one.
I very much want to link my comments onto this one. I think a society that is more economically just and more inclusive, I think that could be a solution.
Yes, Samir.
For me, love and education.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. On the love and education note, we are trying to understand jihad and radicalism from being vulnerable to giving in to being exploited by political Islam. Try to be the eyes and ears for the government, for government to be more inclusive. But something quite important coming from Dr. Chaudhry is that Islam needs to be contextualized. Maybe it needs to evolve. And also for regulating madrasas. Well, I'm not having a conversation there, as we said, opening a bag of worms, but these are just ideas where we are trying to understand. But one thing is for sure, love. Love all, hate less, love life, not death. How did you like this show? Please write to me on chaichat@aajtak.com, or you can Twitter me @Lavina Tandon. Thank you, take care, God bless, and please let's spread love.